Neville Goddard's simple formula for changing the future. The first step in changing the future is desire. That is, define your objective. Know definitely what you want. Second, construct an event which implies fulfillment of your desire. The third step is to induce a state akin to sleep. Then mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action. Imagine all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now. You must participate in the imaginary action, not merely stand back and look on, but feel that you are actually performing the action, so that the imaginary sensation is real to you. Basically, you don't think of your desire, but from your desire. It is important always to remember that the proposed action must be one which follows the fulfillment of your desire. For example, suppose you desired promotion in office, then being congratulated would be an event you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. Having selected this action as the one you will experience in imagination to imply promotion in office, induce a state bordering on sleep, a drowsy state, but one in which you are still able to control the direction of your thoughts, a state in which you are attentive without effort. Then visualize a friend standing before you. Put your imaginary hand into his. Feel it to be solid and real, and carry on an imaginary conversation with him in harmony with the feeling of having been promoted. And remember, you do not visualize yourself at a distance and point of space and at a distance and point of time being congratulated on good fortune. Instead, you make everywhere here and the future now. The difference between feeling yourself in action, here and now, and visualizing yourself in action, as though you were on a motion picture screen, is the difference between success and failure. The difference will be appreciated if you will now visualize yourself climbing a ladder. Then, with eyelids closed, imagine that a ladder is right in front of you, and feel yourself actually climbing it. Experience has taught me to restrict the imaginary action, which implies fulfillment of the desire, to condense the idea into a single act, and to reenact it over and over again, until it has the feeling of reality. Otherwise, your attention will wander off along an associational track, and hosts of associated images will be presented to your attention, and in a few seconds they will lead you hundreds of miles away from your objective in point of space and years away in point of time. And also, the idea must be maintained in the mind without any sensible effort on your part. You must, with the minimum of effort, permeate the mind with a feeling of the wish fulfilled. Drowsiness facilitates change because it favors attention without effort, but it must not be pushed to the state of sleep, in which you no longer are able to control the movements of your attention, but a moderate degree of drowsiness in which you are still able to direct your thoughts. And adding some additional tips from Neil's blog, subthoughts.wordpress.com. Once the scene does feel real in every way, allow yourself to drift off to sleep while in that feeling. This allows your subconscious to really take a hold of the image. When you wake up, go about your day. Continue in the feeling that your wish has been fulfilled. This can be easier to do after such a visualization exercise, because you now have a memory of the event. This is where faith comes in. What do these steps accomplish? As you go about your day, your subconscious will notice that what you feel, the desire, has been fulfilled, and your physical reality, your life, are incongruent. They don't match up. Your subconscious will move forward to make the two line up again. Hold on to your belief, and the wish fulfilled moves the subconscious to alter your physical reality, creating the desired event by working through you, your environment, and others around you, even people you do not know. Understand that the subconscious creates your reality every day, all day. Neville's process of imagination puts you in the artist's chair. You choose what gets created. Question: what if I need something to manifest by a certain time? Answer: Neville's response is to make then, the date of the deadline, become now. It's happening now, not at some point in the future. In other words, see the date, time, and place associated with your deadline. You're here and now. In your imagination, use that time and place as a setting, but again, see the wish is already fulfilled. Question: do I need to take personal action to bring my wish about? Answer: the answer is maybe. Your subconscious will bring about change, possibly by causing you to take action. Neville frequently taught that no action was necessary outside of giving your desire the tones of reality in your imagination. In fact, he often encouraged people to test his method by visualizing an item they desire coming into their life without them paying for it or taking any action. A short little Neville reminder for the day. Remember, we're here experimenting with this, so you must try this out 1,000 times. What I like to do is ask myself, am I living the life I want to be living? And if not, what would I change? And then I turn that around, that sentence, as though it already is, a sentence that would catch the feeling of what I want fulfilled. And every morning, noon, and night, read this, especially with feeling. But people have said things that they didn't intentionally feel and still have had things come about. But we're looking for a technique, consistency, especially with things that seem big. There was just one story I remember where Neville talked about affirmations, and that was with Robert Milliman. Something along the lines of, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. Joseph Murphy, as most of you know, who was a co-student with Neville under the same teacher Abdullah, would often successfully use more affirmations, especially aimed at the subconscious mind. So experiment and see what works for you. Simply saying the affirmations, or writing the affirmations. Usually, we write them in present tense, but it's not to say that there aren't people who have used other tenses and have still had success, like the Dilbert cartoon creator, Scott Adams. In his case, he would write his affirmations in a future tense and still had many successes. Perhaps in his case, writing in the future tense of I will instead of I am, perhaps helped him go past the resistance of the conscious mind that might say, no you don't. But it's important to note two things. One, that Scott Adams was disciplined and did this each day. And two, that along with writing these affirmations, regardless of the tense, he did visualize as though it was already done, thus catching the end feeling, as Neville and other mystics have taught us. So I encourage you to write out the essence of what you want, or write it out as affirmations already done, perhaps to print it, or to keep it in your cell phone or on your laptop or PC, where you regularly see it throughout the day, especially morning, noon, and or night when you're sleepy. And for many, it will be helpful throughout the rest of the day to come back and visit, even just for 2 seconds, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. These moments can be piggybacked on other poignant times during your day, such as maybe during a break at work, and maybe after dinner, before you rest and relax and watch some TV. If you don't know what you want exactly this moment, that's okay. But at the start of every day, we can ask ourselves, what do we want? What are we hot about? And we can keep a journal of this, whether in a physical notebook or even a virtual app notebook. And the next days that follow, we can ask ourselves, do we still feel hot about this? If not this, what do we feel hot about? And if you don't feel hot about something, that's okay too. Remember, Neville taught us that our desires come from God, and as we start to awaken in this dream of life, it's natural that our desires will also evolve. Simply imagine the best for yourself and others, that we can all have it all. And lastly, Neville talked about how we sometimes make mistakes. Sometimes we make 1,000 mistakes, and we get hurt by these mistakes. We even hurt others with these mistakes. But nevertheless, you are trying a power, and the power is Christ. Christ is this wonderful power, and this is your wonderful imagination. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. So practice this imaginal skill each day. Don't be afraid to experiment or to make mistakes. Simply persist. Simply persist. Even enjoy the process. And happy imagining. If you'd like to become a donor or patron of this channel, please look for the links below this video. Donors and patrons have access to extended versions of these condensed recordings. Thank you. Neville Goddard, 1943, New Yorker article. A Blue Flame on the Forehead by Robert M. Coates, September 11, 1943, excerpts. I've been casting about in such waters as these for some time, seeking, if not truth, at least some understanding of the appeal that attracts so many followers. I think I came nearest to that understanding one Sunday not long ago when I listened to an address by Neville Goddard. Mr. Goddard, with a certain stateliness, he ordinarily refers to himself merely as Neville, speaks Sundays at 8 p.m. in the auditorium of the Union Methodist Episcopal Church on West 48th Street at an admission charge of 25 cents. Mr. Goddard or Neville commands no such audiences as does Dr. Fox, and his teachings are not as extreme as those of some of the others. In both these respects, his position is fairly middle of the road. The night I attended, there were perhaps 200 persons present to receive the message. The auditorium of the Union Church is small and fan-shaped, with rows of pews narrowing toward a lectern on a small dais which serves as pulpit, and the crowd filled it comfortably. Men, I noticed, were outnumbered at least 6-1 by women, and since it was warm, a good many of the men sat with their coats off. Though an organist in the loft was fingering softly through the mixture of deep chords and fragments of hymn tunes which usually precedes a service, there was an air of informality in the atmosphere that suggested a theater before curtain time. People waved to friends in other pews, or got up to join them in little chats. When the organist finished his selection, there was even a round of scattered applause. Then a woman with startling bright red hair stood up in the organ loft in a soprano voice of some power, sang George B. Nevin's Ave Maria. There was another round of applause when she had finished. A moment later, Neville himself appeared in the doorway of the vestry and walked out to his place behind the lectern. He was considerably younger than I had expected and definitely handsomer. He is a man of not much over 30, tall, slender, and dark, with black hair and a long, slightly Latin face that inevitably, a dozen years ago, would have resulted in his being called the Valentino type. He wore a well-cut brown tweed suit, a blue shirt, and a black and red striped tie, and he stood for half a minute or so, smiling at us until the applause that greeted him had subsided. Then he started to talk, and I had some difficulty following him. For one thing, he had the old oratorical trick of keeping his voice low until he had the full attention of his audience. In addition, his dissertation was somewhat elliptical, and it was some time before I was able to keep track of his thought as he jumped, seemingly at random, from one subject to another. He began by speaking of the Bible. "Don't misunderstand me," he said at one point. "I love the Bible. I know that a good many people, maybe some of you here before me, may think it is dull and uninteresting. I don't feel that way about it. I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't read it. I've told you many times we are not here to suffer. We are here to enjoy life, to take joy in the very act of being. And if I really didn't like the Bible, I should never waste time on it. I do, though. And if you would approach it in the same way I do, I am sure you'd enjoy it too. For the Bible is not history. Forget about that. What the Bible is a great psychological drama, perhaps the greatest that has ever been written, and once you get the fact well in mind, a good many of the things in it that seem obscure and complex will be simple. God, for instance, he was speaking more rapidly now, with quick, free gestures, and a certain urgency had crept into his tone. He seemed hardly to pause at all to draw breath. There was something engaging about his manner. It was the urgency of a youth trying desperately to explain a point that he himself is sure of, but that he's sure his hearers won't understand, unless he's a bit vehement about it. What is God? He went on. He is man. He's the mind. He's the mood. And it would be wrong of us to suppose so. They are the psychological attributes of man, his fears, his passions, his desires. And that house we hear spoken of, in my Father's house there are many mansions. What is that but the mind of man itself, or the head, where the brain is housed? Do you see how simple it can become once the right approach is taken? I was beginning to sort out individuals in the congregation around me. In the pew in front of mine, 2 women of about 45 were sitting, one of them thin and angular, with a look of what seemed to be a permanent discontent on her face, the other short, plump, and unemotional. Both were listening with the closest attention. In another pew, there are 2 girls with elaborate hairdos who reminded me of restaurant hostesses. In still another was an elderly man with a deeply lined face, small sly eyes, and a huge beaked nose. He was sitting in his shirt sleeves, with his coat folded carefully on his lap, and he kept nodding his head and smiling gently, as if he had heard all this before and deprived a certain reminiscent pleasure from its repetition. Neville paused, pulled a handkerchief from his breast pocket, passed it swiftly over his brow, and went on. "Or tongues," he said. "They spoke in many tongues. We find that reference in the Bible, and if we speak the tongues, there must be a certain reference of the languages that the tongues are speaking. Many tongues, many languages, and then how shall we find the real language, the language of meaning, and the meaning that the language represents? In a word, the mood." "I can explain it best to you by an example," Neville continued, and he described a woman who wants to be married, and who imagines herself in the wedding gown, all ready for the ceremony. Will she not then be nearer to the fulfillment than if she just said, "Oh, the whole thing is impossible, it can never be"? Or suppose a man is in prison. Instead of saying to himself, "Yes, I am the Jones that is in prison," he says, "No, I am not that Jones, I am another Jones, the one that is free." He will have taken another mood, he will be speaking another language, and the mood and the language will be those of freedom. And if he achieves the right mood, if he finds the hidden language, then he will be free. "He will be free," Neville repeated. Holding both edges of the lectern with his hands, he stared out at the audience. "For it is the mood that is the key." He went on, his voice rising slightly. "And I say to you now, if you can achieve one perfect mood, if you can construct one consummate desire, then the mood and desire shall be one, and you shall be happy. For the mood is God, and God is the mood. And when you will have achieved that mood, then you will see the tongue of flame on your forehead. You will hear the thunder, or sometimes it might be more like a high shrill whistling, so high that it seems unearthly. And as you see that flame, as you hear the sound, you will slip." He emphasized the word by a snap of his fingers. You will slip into that deep which is your real being. And while you are there, then your mood will become real and your desire will be granted to you, and become real and actual to you too. I gathered that Neville's theory is that if you wish hard enough on anything, and then fall asleep or fall into a trance while wishing, your wish will be granted, at least for as long as you're asleep. He went on to declare that if the practice is carried on long enough and in the proper manner, the dream merges with actuality, and you really are or have what you wanted to be or wanted to acquire. At the time, I was too surprised by the spectacle of a man in a brown tweed suit in a church on West 48th Street, talking calmly about flames on the forehead and thunder, or whistling in the ears, to come to any conclusions about the validity of Neville's theory. No one else seemed to be surprised. The old man with the lined, smiling face was still gently nodding. The two women in the pew in front of me were leaning forward, more rapt than ever. Neville looked us over for a moment. "A withered arm can be straightened," he said. "A blind man can be made to see. Or if you are poor and want to be rich, if you are sick and want to be well, if you're tied to someone that you want to be rid of. I'm no moralist, and as I've told you many times in the course of these lectures, we are here to find joy in living and not to suffer. And you can achieve all these things if the mood is approached in the proper way." A technique was required, he went on to explain. Many people wanting to be rich, for instance, merely thought themselves rich and let it go at that. "You must do more than that. You must feel," he said. "You must feel yourself rich, feel the thrill of it, and the satisfaction." There were also, he said, certain misconceptions arising from the fact that sleep is part of the performance. Many people hearing that think the best time to seek the silence is at night, when they're tired and likely to fall asleep anyway. They are wrong, and they will never get good results that way. This isn't like ordinary sleep. As I told you before, it is a dropping off into the deep of your subconscious. It comes like that, again the snap of the fingers. And the right time to do it is when you're full of energy, not when you're tired and listless. Lie down then if you can, relax, look upward, and when you see the blue flame on your forehead, you will know that the mood is upon you. It may last 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. But while it lasts, the wish will have begun to germinate and grow, and it will be hard for anything to rub it out later. Even now, in the midst of battle, a man can call himself away from the strife and danger and not be there. Or a friend with power can do it for him, for while you sleep, there is a watcher, and that watcher is omnipotent and omniscient, and no power, no armies of men can stop the watcher's gift if the watcher wills to give them. There was a discrepancy, I thought, between the reference to divinity and Neville's earlier description of God as a mere embodiment of psychology. Neville let his voice drop suddenly to a conversational tone. "I should like to ask," he said, "if anyone here has achieved the mood since our last meeting." There was a pause, and then 2 hands went up. One belonged to a woman some distance from where I was sitting. The other was the smiling old man's. Neville beamed, first on one and then on the other. "If you did it, you will surely get results," he said. He stood very still for an appreciable time, looking straight before him. Then he said, "Let us now go into the silence." He squared himself on his feet, shut his eyes, flung his head sharply back, and became immobile. Everyone in the audience but myself, everyone I could see at any rate, did much the same thing, and in a very few seconds the whole auditorium was so still that I could hear the mild sounds of Sunday traffic, the car horns, the tire whir, and the occasional voices of pedestrians as it moved on the street outside. For at least 2 minutes I found myself in the midst of perhaps 200 people, all sitting with their heads thrown back and their eyes closed, silently courting the touch of a thin blue flame on their foreheads, and the sound of a high shrill whistle in their ears that would tell them that their innermost wishes were in the process of being fulfilled. It was an odd sight, touching, saddening, grotesque, and a little laughable all at once. When Neville finally opened his eyes, he glanced around and cleared his throat. There was a stir as his audience readjusted itself to the everyday world. "Yes," he said, "I really believe that the day will come when you and I will travel without the use of airplanes or trains or motor cars. We will simply put ourselves in the mood of being where we want to be, and be there, as this power we touch upon becomes universal." He glanced at his wristwatch and smiled. "But it's 9 o'clock, and it's warm, and I've been talking now for a long time. If there are any who want to go, then it will be perfectly all right for them to go now. Afterward, we will have a short question period." A man and a woman got up down in front and tiptoed self-consciously up the aisle. The rest of us stayed where we were, and after a fairly short silence, a tall elderly woman in a loose gray dress and a large black straw hat got up from a seat several rows in front of me. She spoke in an embarrassed, almost inaudible fashion, and it was hard for me to hear what she had to say. I gathered, though, that her difficulty had to do with voices. She heard voices while she was in the silence, and since Neville seemed never to have mentioned this phenomenon, she wanted to know what its significance was. While he listened, Neville swabbed his face with his handkerchief. "No," he said, when she had finished, "I don't think you really hear voices. What you hear is the thrill of having heard voices. And since all that is part of the mood, and you are striving to achieve it, you can hardly have any other significance." The next person to ask a question was a man. He too sat a few rows in front of me, and I couldn't see his face. He had a black suit and very black, close-cropped hair, and the back of his rather thin neck was so white as to seem almost tinged with blue. He was slightly stooped, and his build and his coloring somewhat reminded me of a type one often sees along the streets of the city. The faces of such men are usually pale, carnaced, studious-looking, and a little worried. He wanted to know about disciplining the mind. It had occurred to him that since the success of achieving the mood depended so much on the proper control of the thoughts, it might be as well for the master to give some advice on it. Neville was a trifle abrupt in his answer, and it struck me that possibly he was eager to have the thing over and get home for a shower. He said that he didn't believe any special disciplining of the mind was necessary to achieve the mood, or at least he knew of no sure method. The discipline you need is within yourself, and it concerns your fears and thoughts and desires as much as your mind. The thing to do is to bring it out. He paused and then threw in an extra bit of advice. But above all, don't modify your objective. What I mean is, suppose you're a man who wants a better job, and you set yourself to attain it by cultivating the mood. But suppose at the same time there are doubts in your mind. You're not sure you can handle the responsibilities of that job. You're not sure that you're well enough educated and so on. Well then, what you're really wishing is that you were smart enough or well-trained enough to feel able to wish for the job. That's what I call modifying the objective, and it makes the mood all confused. It's the cause of a good many of our failures. Are there any more questions? A moment later, the man in the black suit was up again. He asked embarrassingly if Neville minded his asking another question. "No, indeed," said Neville, pleasantly enough. And the man went on to say he was still deeply troubled by the matter of mental discipline. What happens when I try to attain the mood, he said earnestly, is that I just can't attain it. Instead of me controlling my thoughts control me. My mind wanders or something. Neville said perhaps he should feel more. Instead of concentrating so much on your thoughts, he continued, try to feel. Feel the thrill of having whatever you desire, and the joy of it, the great joy and the satisfaction. Then your thoughts will take care of themselves. They will follow your feelings, and you'll have more success with the mood. He paused just for an instant. Well, he said, with finality, if there are no more questions, we'll consider this meeting ended. He announced the succeeding week's meetings, which would include a series of Bible classes, admission $1. There was a round of applause, which Neville acknowledged smilingly.
Neville, an old letter from Abdullah, condensed. Neville went through an old Bible of his, and he found a letter over 30 years old that Abdullah had sent to him. One of the things in the letter that Abdullah had sent that may be of interest to you. He said, creatures are never guilty of the seeming wrongs they do. The Lord ordained all deeds, and He alone performs all that is performed. He accuses no one of evil, for all have fulfilled His command and performed His service. When we're sleeping, we go through life, and sometimes we feel bad luck or injustices happen to us, to people we care about, to even people we feel are good people. Sometimes we even wonder why sometimes bad things happen to good people. When we as one, God, fell asleep, we sometimes forget the seeds we planted, but the adversities that come into our seemingly individual lives, or the horrors we see in the world. Abdullah was teaching Neville that it is all correct. The chaos is all in order. It's just sleeping and forgetting, but these things are there to wake us, for we often grow most by shocks. Think about when you watch a good movie. If the whole time you're watching the movie, you're conscious it's just a movie, you're aware that the actors are just acting, it's just an artificial stage, would you still enjoy the movie? We enjoy the movie when we lose ourselves in it, just like in this game of life. But the point of life is to wake up and to be able to have experiences from that waking, where we can have a sense of losing ourselves, but not to the point of forgetting we're the creator of the creations, suffer by our creations and feel trapped by them. When Neville was identified with that vastness, he was able to stop all of creation. One day, we, as seeming individuals, will each also have that experience, as we wake back up to the one great consciousness we have always been. So in the end, nothing is condemned. And as Neville has often quoted from the Bible, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Luke 22:34. When we're asleep, we are under compulsion, and most of the seemingly other people in the world are also asleep, being reflections of you pushed outward. So all are only following the command of the great dreamer within. So remember, everything is ordered, perfectly ordered.
Neville Goddard, Imagination Creates Reality, lecture excerpts. Your own wonderful human imagination is the actual creative power of God within you. It is your savior. If you were thirsty, water would be your savior. If you needed a job, employment would be your savior. Your imagination is the power to save you from whatever circumstances you now find yourself. You can experience your heart's desire through the use of your imagination. Nothing is impossible to your imagination. Your imagination is unlimited in what it can accomplish. If you can imagine something, you can achieve it. Let me give you an example. If you were unable to walk and were confined to a wheelchair, you could close your eyes and imagine yourself running on the beach or wading in the water. If you could imagine yourself doing this until it took on the tones of reality, you could accomplish a healing that would allow you to actually walk or run. The way to use your imagination creatively is this. Relax in a chair or on a bed and close your eyes. First, determine what it is you wish to experience. Then in this state of complete relaxation, bring to mind the end result of what it is you desire. In other words, If you were seeking a promotion at work, the end result might be that people would congratulate you on your promotion. You might move to a larger office. Take any one of these events and with your eyes closed, actually hear your friends congratulate you on your promotion. Feel their hands in yours as they tell you how happy they are for you. By actually feeling that you are being congratulated, your imagination will go to work to bring about that state in your outer world. You need not be concerned about how this will be accomplished. Your imagination will use whatever natural means are necessary to bring it about. What you do in imagination is an instantaneous creative act. However, in the three-dimensional world, events appear in a time sequence. Therefore, it may take a short interval of time to realize in the outer world what you have just experienced in imagination. After you have performed this act in your imagination, open your eyes and go about your normal, natural affairs, confident that what you have done must come to fruition in your world. Make your inner conversations conform to your imaginal act. You have planted a seed, and you will soon see the harvest of that which you sowed. When you go into your imagination, make sure that you are actually performing the action, hearing the words, touching the object, or smelling the aroma in your self-conceived drama. What you do in your imagination is not merely a daydream in which you see events in your mind's eye. You must enter the dream as if you were actually there. You must make then, now, and make there, here. To make this perfectly clear, imagine that you would experience driving a new car after you have achieved your goal. In that case, you should not merely see a new car in your mind's eye. You must actually enter the dream. Feel yourself seated behind the steering wheel. Smell the newness of the interior. Feel yourself enjoying a comfortable ride. Feel the happiness that would be yours after accomplishing your dream. That which you experience in imagination is an actual creative act. It is a fact in the fourth dimension of space, and it will make its appearance in this three-dimensional world just as surely as planting a seed will result in the growth of a particular plant. Once you have planted this seed in your imagination, do not uproot it by being anxious about how it will be accomplished. Each seed has its own appointed time. Some seeds take a few days, others a little longer. Feel confident that what you have planted will appear in your world. Your imagination will draw all that it needs to make your dream an actual reality. If it takes others to play a part in order to accomplish your end, your imagination will draw that person into your drama to play his or her part in a sequence of events. Your only responsibility is to remain faithful to your imaginal act until you experience it in your outer world. You can repeat your imaginal act each night before falling asleep. In fact, you may wish to enact this drama over and over again until it feels normal and natural to you as you drop off to sleep. Your imagination will work out the means to realize your dreams while your conscious mind sleeps. Bring your five senses into play as you perform your imaginal activity. Actually hear a friend's voice congratulating you or feel yourself hugging that person. If you wanted a new piano, run your hand over the smooth wood, touch the keys, and listen to the sound. If you wanted to receive a dozen roses, actually smell the fragrance and touch their velvety petals. Finally, you must be persistent in attaining your desire. Continue to imagine what you want until you have actually attained it. You do nothing else to obtain your desire. If it is necessary to take some action, you will be led to do so in a normal, natural manner. You do not have to do anything to help bring it about. If you think of your desire during the day, give thanks that it is already an accomplished fact, because it is. Dream better than the best you know. How the law works. The law of identical harvest or cause and effect is impersonal and can be used to bring into your experience anything you can conceive. Since creation is finished, every possible state already exists. Your fusion with a particular state, imagining with feeling what you would experience were you in that state, causes that state to be projected on your screen of space. This law cannot be changed or broken and always reproduces in your outer world the exact duplicate of any belief you consent to as true. If you would change your world, you must change your beliefs. Since consciousness is the only cause, You cannot blame others for the conditions which presently exist, nor can fate or chance be the cause of that which you are now experiencing. Nothing can alter the course of events in your life except a change in your own consciousness. Whatever is appearing in your world now, although it appears real and an unalterable fact, is a reflection of previous activity in your own consciousness. Therefore, a change in consciousness will reflect that change in the future just as surely as past beliefs reflect the present. Man is pure formless consciousness, and that which he conceives himself to be is an illusion or reflection of the particular idea he holds true. These illusions exist only so long as man focuses his attention upon them and gives them life. The conscious mind forms beliefs and opinions from the evidence of the senses, or the perceived outer world. The creative power within each of us accepts as true that which the conscious mind impresses upon it. Your creative power takes those ideas, which are thought of with feeling, and projects them in your outer world. It is important to remember that not all thoughts are creative, only those which are believed to be true, or which are joined with feeling create the circumstances and events that you will encounter. Therefore, emotions such as anger, fear, love, or joy are creative. You must guard the emotions which you allow to enter your consciousness, just as you would discriminate in allowing a stranger into your home. You cannot allow negative emotions to fill your mind without suffering the consequences of experiencing the state that which those emotions are joined. Fear of loss brings loss into your world. You could take every outward precaution to guard against loss, but if you fear loss, you will most certainly experience it in your affairs. Feelings of love and joy create happy events and loving relationships. Feeling abundant brings riches into your life. A person who is unloving or suspicious and feels that others take advantage of him draws to himself that which he believes. No matter what he does externally, his relationship with others will reflect that which he accepts as true. He may want a loving relationship, but he can draw to himself only that which he is conscious of being. Like literally does attract like, as within so without. Consciousness is reality, and that which is perceived by our senses and appears so real is but the shadow of that which we believe ourselves and the world to be. Conscious use of the law. Whenever I say I am is creating something. Prayer is believing that we have already received that which we ask. When I say I am attaching my awareness of being to something. Now you cannot lie and not believe what you are saying, but you cannot believe something about I am and not create it. We are creating morning, noon, and night by our I am statements. If you say I don't feel well and you believe it, you are perpetuating illness in your life. You must change those statements to I feel wonderful. We were taught, let the weak man say I am strong, but you can't say it like a parrot. We have to pray, say I am, believing that it is true, and then we will receive. First, we must be like the watchman at the gate. We must watch every thought that contains I am. If you are observant, you will see that you have created every circumstance and experience of your life. Another important word to watch is if. The conscious mind is very subtle in expressing doubt. We may be able to keep our minds focused on what we want by using positive I statements. If we are not careful, we may let a little if sneak in without recognizing its implication. We could say, I feel wonderful, but then follow it with if the pain continues, however, I will see a doctor on Tuesday. Ifs are always followed by something negative, and that is simply doubt creeping in to steal the good seed we have sown. Remove the word if from your vocabulary, as it is not productive of that which you would like to reap. If puts everything in the past or future tense, and I always experience what I believe I am. I am is not future tense. Getting well is not being well. I must believe that I am already what I want to be. So begin to monitor every word I am that you say. Do you see a pattern? Don't the circumstances of your life reflect what you have been saying? You have been misusing the creative power that is God, I am. Now that you are aware of what you have been doing, watch every word and make it conform to what you wish to bring into your life. Eventually, you will have faith that what you are stating, though there is no outward evidence to support it, is a fact in consciousness and will shortly project itself so that you may experience it in the outer. Desire. You may question whether a desire to kill or injure someone can be inspired by God. The answer is that no man actually desires to kill or harm another. He may wish to be free from that seeming other, and through his limited understanding, he feels that the only way he can achieve such freedom is by destroying the other. Man does not realize that the desire for freedom contains within itself the power and the means to fulfill itself. Because of his lack of faith, man distorts these gifts from God. He does not realize that God, the wisdom and power within him, has ways that he as man knows not of, and those ways are past finding out. Learn to be grateful for the desires you have been given. They already exist and are ready for embodiment in your world. You are not called upon to do anything to aid their realization except to free your mind of any doubt as to how they will come about and completely accept them as you would a gift from a loved one. Be observant. The importance of objectively observing your thoughts cannot be stressed enough. It is easy to slip into thought patterns that can hinder us in achieving our desires. It then becomes easy to blame others or attribute our frustrations to second causes. Being a rather impatient person, I'm usually anxious to get home after work, and I particularly dislike waiting in lines. I began to notice that no matter what time I chose to pick up a few items at the market, I would encounter problems at the check stand, such as price checks needing to be done, people writing checks who had trouble locating their identification, and various other kinds of delays. I found myself dreading these occasions, and I wanted to do something about the annoying situation. As I began to observe my thoughts, I found that while standing in line, I would say to myself, I always have to wait. Then I realized that those statements made over and over again had created that which I did not wish to experience. I consciously changed that statement to no matter when I stop at the market, I never have to wait. Of course, that new statement has worked just as well as the old negative one. As you begin to observe your thoughts, do not be discouraged if you find that your inner conversations do not match the way you would feel if you have achieved your goal. You must first become aware of what you are doing with your creative power before you can begin to change it. I ask you to go down to the potter's house and see what he is doing. If the vessel is spoiled, then rework it into the kind of vessel that will please you. As you begin observing your thoughts, you cannot avoid the realization that you alone are the cause of all that comes into your world. You alone can change it. Inner conversations. All of us are mentally speaking within ourselves every waking moment. Our inner conversations must match the wish fulfilled if we would realize our desire. If our desire is for a better job and we imagine ourselves being congratulated because we are gainfully employed in a wonderful position, we must also make our inner conversations conform to that end. We must be certain that we are not saying within ourselves something like, "That boss of mine doesn't believe in promoting people," or, "Never mind, it would be difficult to find any job at my age, never mind a better one," or similar statements that would imply that we do not have that which we desire. We must persist in the feeling of our imaginal act by making our mental conversations conform to what we would say had we already realized our aim. If, for instance, we wish to own a new car, we could imagine a new car parked in our garage, or imagine ourselves driving it, or imagine our friends admiring it. We must then make our inner conversations reflect the type of conversations we would engage in were we really the owner of a new car. Our conversations would consist of discussing our new car with friends, such as telling them of the wonderful fuel mileage we are receiving, or hearing our friends tell us how much they enjoy riding in our new car, etc. Our inner conversations are just as creative as our deliberate imaginings of the wish fulfilled. In fact, if they are of the opposite nature, they can negate what we have imagined. You must watch what you are saying internally to make sure that these conversations coincide with your wish fulfilled. If you become aware that these inner talks contradict what you would like to achieve, revise them so that they already follow the track that would indicate that you already have what you desire or are already that person you wish to be. Appearances. That which is confronting you in your world now is the result of your past thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and imaginal activity. These appearances will continue in being as long as you give them life through your conscious awareness of them. You must disregard the evidence of your senses as it pertains to any undesirable condition in your life. You must imagine and feel that you have already attained that which you want to experience, rather than that which you do not want to continue in being. This may appear difficult, yet you have probably exercised this principle unconsciously to produce negative results. When I was in my early 20s, I found myself in a situation that was very unpleasant to me, and I wanted to get out of it. After attending a lecture by Neville, I waited to speak to him afterwards. I briefly told him of my unhappy circumstances and was hoping he would offer some advice as to how to change them. He smiled at me and said, "Don't accept it." At that time in my life, I did not fully grasp what Neville had been teaching. I thought he had misunderstood my question, and I tried to clarify my problem by stating that I had already made the choice to be in the situation I now found so unpleasant. Neville again smiled and said, "Don't accept it." I left his presence quite frustrated, thinking he had not understood my problem. I continued to read the 2 books I had by Neville. I gradually understood that regardless of the circumstances which surrounded me, I did not need to accept them as final. I began to imagine what I wanted rather than focus my thoughts on my negative surroundings. An event took place 2 weeks after I began my imaginal acts that was instrumental in bringing about my heart's desire 5 months later. That of a brand new home. Meanwhile, the situation that had been so depressing to me improved, and I spent the next 5 months planning what I would do in my new home. Think about some past disappointment you may have had. Perhaps you were looking forward to attending a special event with someone. In your anticipation of it, did you think, "This is too good to be true. Something will probably happen to spoil it." Something probably did happen to create conflict or to cause you to miss it entirely. Man finds it relatively simple to disregard the promise of something good by thinking of all the reasons why he cannot achieve it. People around you may be quick to point out that you are being unrealistic when you mention a desire that appears difficult or impossible to reach. We should all be unrealistic in the face of the army of doubt if we would experience our wish fulfilled. We are called upon to disregard the facts which would deny the achievement of our heart's desire. Habit is the only thing that keeps our thoughts moving along the old familiar negative ruts. No one can change your thought patterns and therefore your life but you. It is worth all the effort it may take to center your attention and feel as if you already possess that which you want and place the things as they are. Consciousness is the only cause and the only reality. Every negative experience was produced by first giving attention and feeling to that condition. What consciousness has made, it can unmake. Your responsibility is to impress upon your mind the change you wish to express. Your imagination is the creative power that can and will accomplish the end without effort and in a natural way. Appearances confirm our former habitual patterns of thought. That which you imagine yourself to be today will project itself in your world tomorrow. Persistence in assuming that you are the person you wish to be, despite your present circumstances, is the only condition imposed upon you to embody that ideal. Revision. Your present world reflects the sum total of all that you believe to be true of yourself and others. That which you imagine yourself to be today goes forward and will confront you in the future. If you have forgotten your imaginal activities of the past, that which you see appearing in your world indicates the kind of seeds you have previously sown. Assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled is using your imagination creatively to bring into your world that which you desire to experience. You can use the art of revision to change the effects of prior thoughts and beliefs. If, for instance, you had gone to an interview for a job that you truly wanted, but later learned that someone else was hired, you can revise that news to make it conform to that which you wish you had heard. If you react by feeling depressed or assume any other negative attitude, you would then create the same type of rejection in the future. Your reactions, whether positive or negative, are creative of future circumstances. In your imagination, you can hear words congratulating you on getting a wonderful new job. That imaginal act now goes forward and you encounter this pleasant experience in the future. As you review your day, it is important to revise each negative reaction so that you can remember it as what you wished had happened, rather than storing that memory as it did occur. What you think of with feeling or emotion is an actual fact. That which you experience in the physical world is merely a shadow, reflecting the reality of your imaginal activity. Therefore, when you revise a conversation, an unhappy experience, or a quality about yourself, you are literally experiencing it in reality, your consciousness. The outer world is a delayed reaction of the inner and is confined to a dimension of space where events occur in a time sequence. Revision then literally changes the past. It replaces what occurred in the outer world with a revised version. The revised scene then gives off its effect by going forth to change future events. Dwelling on past irritations or hurts perpetuates them and creates a vicious circle that serves to confirm these negative emotions. The circle can be broken by starting now to revise anything you no longer wish to sustain in your world. By revising the past, you rid yourself of any effect it may have on your future. Revision is truly the key, which can be used to unlock the doors which have kept you trapped in a particular state. States of consciousness. Anyone can enter a state consciously or fall into a state inadvertently. You may move into different states throughout your lifetime, or you may occupy a single state. Desire is what usually motivates us to move from one state to a higher level. Since a state is total and complete in itself, when we enter a state, we are compelled to behave in a manner dictated by that state. For instance, in the state of poverty, we would find ourselves constantly in need of funds. We would have difficulty making ends meet and have no way to enjoy luxuries. Should we be given a large sum of money, if we remain in a state of poverty, filling our mind with thoughts of lack and limitation, we would soon find ourselves without funds and again experiencing the same difficulties. The reverse would be true if we occupied a state of wealth. When we are in a state, we see only the contents of that state and are compelled to act in accordance with all that the state entails. While in a particular state, you believe certain things are true and would find it difficult to understand another point of view. In the state of poverty, it is easy to focus your thoughts on the problems of providing food, shelter, and clothing. When you succeed in moving out of this state, you no longer find it difficult to acquire these things. Most people attribute this change of fortune to a change in circumstances. However, unless you have moved from the state of poverty, no change in circumstance would be permanent. Rather, moving out of one state and into another in your imagination automatically creates a change in your outer world. The Bible has personified every type of state and calls these states by names known to us as Moses, Noah, Job, Peter, Andrew, and Jesus. Throughout our journey, we enter these states and experience all that they offer. The last state we will enter is the state of Jesus Christ. In this state, we become aware that we are God, the Father, and that we have a Son symbolized as David, who personifies the sum total of all humanity. The journey begins with Adam, who fell asleep and dreamed the dream of life, and then entered the myriad states to gain the experiences necessary before awakening. When you enter the state of Jesus, you know yourself to be God, and your journey into this world of death is then complete. The play. This world, which seems so real, is as much a dream as the dreams we encounter while asleep. Our waking dreams seem so real because it has continuity, while our dreams at night appear to be random sequences, taking place in unfamiliar surroundings and situations. God is the dreamer, dreaming the play into existence, and God plays all the parts. Everyone who appears in your world is God playing that part for you, the author. Each of us is writing his or her own script. If you are dissatisfied with the play, it is up to you to rewrite the script to make it conform to your idea of what the play should be. You cannot demand that the actors in your play change the character they are playing. All changes must take place in the mind of the author. If there is someone in your world who is the source of annoyance or irritation to you, that person has no choice but to play the part called for you in your script. There's nothing you can do on the outside to bring about changes in another. You can use the art of revision to change a line of dialogue, to replace a certain character with another, and to write happy endings to the subplots of the play. When you begin to view this waking dream objectively, you will be able to verify that you have been the author of both the pleasant and unhappy acts in your play. You can radically change the play by using your imagination creatively, by assuming your wish fulfilled. You can change the script on a daily basis by revising the scene that did not please you. The character who disturbed you today will not do so tomorrow if you write the dialogue you wish to hear and alter that role in your imagination. When you awaken to know that you are God, the Father, and author of this magnificent play, and you will understand, each man in his time plays many parts. Your real purpose. God became you so completely that he forgot that he was God. In becoming man, God reached the limit of contraction and opacity. God totally forgets that he is God in order to become and animate his creation, man. God then goes through all of this experience of knowing good and evil and even death, in confidence that man will eventually awake from this dream of life to once again know that he is God. There is only God in the universe fragmenting himself as humanity, and God plays all the parts in this time-space dream. Your own wonderful human imagination is God in action. God speaks to us through desire, urging us to reach higher and higher levels of awareness. Exercising his own wonderful human imagination to achieve these desires, man is actually experiencing God in action. Through faith in his imagination, man will eventually conclude that the power and wisdom of God is within him as his imagination. At the end of this fabulous journey or dream of life, man will awaken to remember that he is God, the Father, enhanced by his experiences he put himself through when he forgot that he was God. Man's sole purpose is to experience Scripture, all of the states of consciousness personified as men in the Bible. Man's goal is to reach a state called Jesus Christ. Then he will know that he really is the Father, Jesus, and that his Son is Christ, all of humanity fused into one being. Man may have many goals in the meantime, to accumulate possessions, to become powerful, to become famous, or to express anything that he desires. Eventually, the hunger to know God will come upon him, and then he will then have the experiences that are necessary to bring to his remembrance that he truly is God, the Father. Case histories. This is the story of Mrs. E.F., who had a desire to live near the ocean and used her imagination to fulfill her desire. She did not want to sell her present home, but wanted to lease it for a year before making the decision to move to the beach permanently. Mrs. E.F. told two of her friends about her wish. One friend, who had used the principle of imagination, told Mrs. E.F. that she would imagine visiting her at the beach in her new home. 1 week later, Mrs. E.F. traveled to Hawaii for a scheduled vacation. While there, she received a call from a friend who lived in San Diego. This friend told Mrs. E.F. that a perfect little house had just come up on the market as a year-round rental, and she thought this house would be perfect for Mrs. E.F. Her friend also said that this was a very desirable rental, and that Mrs. E.F. would need to make a decision immediately, as the rental would very likely not be available when she returned from Hawaii. Mrs. E.F. told her friend to tell the owners that she would take it, trusting her friend's recommendation. Upon Mrs. E.F.'s return from Hawaii, she told her grown daughter that she had decided to rent a house at the beach in San Diego. Her daughter called her later that day and said that the mother of a friend of hers wanted to lease a house. The woman came by the next day, said she loved the house and would like to lease it for a year. Mrs. EF gave notice at work and was able to move within a month. Since she was a nurse, she had no trouble finding a wonderful new job at a nearby hospital. Mrs. EF has since bought a house near the ocean and has spent 17 happy years living at the beach. Mrs. EF imagined she was living at the beach, and her friend imagined that she was visiting her there. They did this for 1 week. It is interesting that while she was on vacation in Hawaii, events moved swiftly to bring about her desire. She did nothing to find a new home, nor did she do anything to rent her present home. Imagination was able to draw the necessary people into her life so that her wish could be fulfilled. What should be done after we have imagined our wish fulfilled? Nothing. You think you can do something, you want to do something, but actually you can do nothing to bring it about. God, our own wonderful human imagination, knows that things are necessary to bring about our desires. It is only necessary to go to the end, to live in the end. If we trust our imagination, it will accomplish all that we ask of it. Imagination can do all things. Have faith in it, and nothing shall be impossible to you. This story concerns a young man referred to as EP, who was a wonderful athlete and was good at many different sports. During this particular time in his life, he became interested in paddling outrigger canoes. He joined a team and was soon competing in local races. In his second year of pursuing this sport, he was on a team that competed in the 50-mile race from Molokai to Honolulu. The Hawaiian outrigger teams usually took first place and were considered unbeatable. EP's team came in 7th, and that was considered quite remarkable considering the great number of teams that competed from all over the world along with the Hawaiian participants. After this race, EP began imagining that his team had won the race. He spent the next year forming a new team, practicing and building his own outrigger canoe. He was convinced that if he imagined himself winning the race, his team would come in first. He, next year, his team, and at least a dozen others flew to Hawaii from Southern California to compete in the annual race. There were several teams with much more experience who were considered likely to place in the top 10, although the Hawaiians were still considered the favorites. At the end of the race, EP's team finished first, ahead of the Hawaiians and all the other teams. EP now holds a paddle engraved with the words, World Champion, which was given to him upon his team taking first place. After winning this coveted title, this young man went on to coach other teams. He also began manufacturing paddles for outrigger canoes. His paddles are known throughout the world and are used by outrigger teams who are among the top teams in the world. EP now makes his home in Hawaii and enjoys coaching teams, manufacturing paddles, fishing, and sailing his own boat. He also uses his boat as an escort craft for the annual outrigger races. Mrs. JK was living in her twin sister's home after having been divorced. Mrs. JK had 3 children, a son and a girl and boy twins. Her sister and her husband had 3 boys. Needless to say, this was a crowded household. Mrs. JK was very desirous of getting married and living in her own home. She had been dating a man but decided that she did not wish to continue the relationship and broke it off. Many of her friends attempted to fix Mrs. JK up with eligible men they knew, but she was not interested in going on blind dates. Several of her friends commented that if she wished to meet an eligible man, she would need to get out and go places. The twins believed in the creative power of imagination, and they had a friend who also knew of the power of imagining. The 3 women determined that they would imagine a ring on Mrs. JK's finger, which would imply that she was married. They did this for several weeks. During this time, Mrs. JK also imagined herself living in her own home. However, when she attempted to do so, she found herself imagining a home exactly like her sister's. One day, Mrs. JK received a call from a friend, who asked her to come to her home and help her wallpaper her kitchen. Mrs. JK agreed to help her friends who lived a few blocks away in the same tract of homes. While she was there, a male neighbor came to visit her friend. The friend introduced Mrs. JK to her neighbor. He later called Mrs. JK and they began to date. 5 months later, Mrs. JK married this man. The interesting part of this story is that all of these people lived in the same large tract of homes. There were only 4 homes in the tract of 1,200 that had the same floor plan. Yes, this woman's husband owned one of the homes that had the same floor plan as Mrs. J.K.'s twin sister. Even though Mrs. J.K. imagined herself living in her own home, she had only been able to imagine herself living in a house identical to her sister's. I could relate hundreds of incidents involving dozens of people in which imagination was used to bring about the desired results. I have chosen just a few stories to illustrate that imagination can be used to solve all manner of problems and bring into your experience your every heart's desire.
Neville Goddard, Dreamers, Mini Talk. Neville teaches that our intentional dreams produce an effect in the world. We can choose dreams to scare us, or we can choose dreams to enlighten us. So why not choose the most marvelous dreams? If all things are possible, what would your dream be? Until we wake from the wheel of reoccurrence, rise into a world completely subject to your imaginative power. You are the creator, and you simply create by imagining. You're a dreamer, and your talent is dreaming. So while you are still dreaming, use your talent of dreaming until you wake in the dream of life. We're all destined to wake. So right now, what is your dream? Even if everything denies it, can you dare to believe it? If you can dare to believe it and persist, no power in the world can stop it. It costs you nothing but to be faithful to your assumption until your dream is projected into your world. Now let us go into the silence and dream. Good. Neville Goddard condensed. Lucid Dream. Neville tells the story of a woman who was dreaming and realized she was dreaming. She remembered Neville's words, so she awoke in her dream. And she awoke in a world just as real as the world around you now. In the dream, she was surrounded by a group of people, but they started remarking about her as though she were from another world, and she got scared. So she remembered what Neville taught her, and she started to feel herself somewhere else. She imagined feeling a bed and a pillow beneath her. She felt herself dissolve, and back to her bed, and so she felt herself back to where she was before the dream. And this is the same technique you can use to put yourself anywhere you want to be in the world. Whatever it is you want, what would you experience if you had it? When you find yourself aware that you are dreaming, wake in your dream and ask yourself, what do you want to experience? And if you had what you wanted, what would you be experiencing right now? And feel it. Use the power of touch to bring it alive in your dream. So every night can become an adventure, a fun adventure of intentionally creating. And soon you'll even start to feel the dreaminess of the wake dream and become less attached to what the senses experience here, that you may more masterfully create what it is you want to experience until you have the ultimate experience of awakening as God. So, for example, if you want to get married, you'd see and feel a ring on your hand. But make it even better, a happy marriage. Tell others how happily married you are, or hear your husband talk of how happily married he is to you. Using the same principle, let's go into the silence. Good.
This video is also inspired by Griv, aka Paul. What did it mean at the end of Neville's lectures when he said, "Let us go into the silence"? For me, it means to meditate on the unconditioned I am. And then from there, you can condition it on whatever you want to be and or whatever you want to have. Does it mean something different for you? An excerpt from the book American Mystic, Memoirs of a Happy Man by Arunachala Ramana. During that time, I also met Neville Goddard. He was giving lectures at the Wilshire Ebel Theatre out on Wilshire Boulevard, and a friend of mine had invited me along to hear him. Well, all of the time in Unity, I'd been looking for someone who had had spiritual awakening, and lo and behold, here was someone who obviously had. After his lecture, I went up to talk to Neville, and he was very gracious, very open. I told him about my involvement in Unity, and he invited me to come back again. He was doing talks on a weekly basis, but occasionally he would do it more than once a week. I started reading his books and listening to him. Neville was occasionally interviewed on television, and the TV talk show called The Joe Pine Show, which ran from 1965 to 1967, had Neville on quite often. Joe Pine would put people on the hot seat, but he didn't do that with Neville because Neville had proven his knowledge with his understanding about the Bible. And Joe Pine would have Neville on to see if someone knew what they were talking about with the Bible. On one show, I watched Neville with 3 fundamentalist Christians who all had their Bibles out. Neville was without a Bible, but he had it in his head, and they debated. They would open their Bible and start reading from it. Neville would say, "Oh, that's the King James. That's the Revised Standard, or that's the New English." Whatever it happened to be, he knew the Bible like no one I'd ever met before or since. Neville would explain the nuances of differences between the various translations of the Bible. You would ask, which translation is correct? How do you know that this one is not the way it should be? Neville was not arrogant, though he knew not only the nuances of the Bible, but of the actual Greek words in the New Testament, and the Hebrew words used in many of the most famous biblical verses of the Old Testament. I didn't get to know Neville intimately, but I was able to go with him a time or two with a group out in Los Angeles. One of Neville's students owned a piece of business property and wanted to put a building up on it, but didn't have the funds to do it. He wanted Neville to see this property and to be with him, to do whatever he could do to lend consciousness and energy to his being able to build on this property. Because Neville had this ability, a real knack for awakening that feeling that something would be yours, whatever it is you wanted to have, do, or be. It was already a fact, a manifested fact. So he invited Neville and asked him to come out and look. It was not easily accessible. It was inconveniently located, and that was one of the reasons he was having difficulty finding people to go along with him. He wanted to borrow the money from the bank, but it was not being supportive. I was invited to go along, and 2 carloads of us went to see the property. We pulled up, got out of the car, Neville walked out, and we all went with him into the middle. There was all kinds of trash, paper, rusty beer cans, bottles, and broken glass, and it wasn't very appealing to the sight. It was just a vacant lot. But Neville stood there looking around and said to the guy who owned it, "I remember when this was a vacant lot. Well, this is certainly a nice building you've built here. Can't you remember when that was a vacant lot? I can remember it." It was to get everybody into a false feeling of what it would be like for there to already be a building standing. Within a month, they were breaking land on that property and started building. Neville's depth and insight and the quality or feeling of his consciousness was so direct and immediate. He was the first being that I ever met who I knew and could feel was coming from awakened awareness, from a quality or state of consciousness that was higher than my own state of consciousness at that time. That was very significant to me then. Neville Goddard's Radio Talk Series at station KECA in Los Angeles, July 1951. By Imagination We Become Excerpts. Have you ever had a prayer answered? What wouldn't men give just to feel certain that when they pray, something definite would happen? For this reason, I would like to take a little time to see why it is that some prayers are answered and some apparently fall on dry ground. Unless we believe that we receive, our prayers will not be answered. A prayer granted implies that something is done in consequence of the prayer which otherwise would not have been done. Therefore, the one who prays is the spring of action, the directing mind, the one who grants the prayer. Such responsibility man refuses to assume, for responsibility, it seems, is mankind's invisible nightmare. We must act on the assumption that we already possess that which we desire, for all that we desire is already present within us. It only waits to be claimed. That it must be claimed is a necessary condition by which we realize our desires. Our prayers are answered if we assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and continue in that assumption. One of the loveliest examples of an answered prayer I witnessed in my own living room, a very charming lady from out of town came to see me concerning prayer. As she had no one with whom to leave her 8-year-old son, she brought him with her at the time of our interview. Seemingly, he was engrossed in playing with a toy truck, but at the end of the interview, with his mother, he said, "Mr. Neville, I know how to pray now. I know what I want, a collie puppy, and I can imagine I'm hugging him every night on my bed." His mother explained to him and to me the impossibilities of his prayer, the cost of a puppy, their confined home, even his inability to care for the dog properly. The boy looked into his mother's eyes and simply said, "But mother, I know how to pray now." And he did. 2 months later, during a Kindness to Animals week in his city, all the school children were required to write an essay on how they would love and care for a pet. You have guessed the answer. His essay, one out of the 5,000 submitted, won the prize, and that prize, presented by the mayor of the city to the lad, was a collie puppy. The boy truly assumed the feelings of his wish fulfilled, hugging and loving his puppy every night. You, like the young boy, can yield yourselves to the lovely images of your desires and persist in your prayer even though you, like the lad, are told that your desires are impossible. The secret of success is found in the word perseverance. The soul imagining itself into the act takes on the results of the act. Not imagining itself into the act, it is ever free from the result. Experience in imagination what you would experience in reality were you already what you want to be, and you will take on the result of that act. Do not experience in imagination what you want to experience in reality, and you will ever be free of the result. Prayer is a controlled waking dream. If we are to pray successfully, we must steady our attention to observe the world as it would be seen by us were our prayer answered. Steadying attention makes no call upon any special faculty, but it does demand control of imagination. We must extend our senses, observe our changed relationship in our world, and trust this observation. The new world is not there to grasp, but to sense, to touch. The best way to observe it is to intensely be aware of it. In other words, we can, by listening as though we heard, and by looking as though we saw, actually hear voices and see scenes from within ourselves that are otherwise not audible or visible. With our attention focused on the state desired, the outer world crumbles, and then the world, like music, by a new setting, tumbles all its discords into harmonies. Life is not a struggle, but a surrender. Our prayers are answered by the powers we invoke, not by those we exert. So long as the eyes take notice, the soul is blind. For the world that moves us is the one we imagine, not the world round about us. We must yield our whole being to the feeling of being the noble one we want to be. If anything is kept back, the prayer is vain. We often are deprived of our high goal by our effort to possess it. We are called upon to act on the assumption that we already are the man we want to be. If we do this without effort, experiencing in imagination what we would experience in the flesh had we realized our goal, we shall find that we do, indeed, possess it. The healing touch is in our attitude. We need change nothing but our attitude towards it. Assume a virtue if you have it not. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Meditation excerpts. I think all happiness depends on the energy to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. to assume the mask of some other more perfect life. If we cannot imagine ourselves different from what we are and try to assume that second, more desirable self, we cannot impose a discipline upon ourselves, though we may accept discipline from others. Meditation is an activity of the soul. It is an active virtue, and an active virtue, as distinguished from passive acceptance of a code, is theatrical. It is dramatic. It is the wearing of a mask. As your goal is accepted, you become totally indifferent to possible failure, for acceptance of the end wills the means to the end. When you emerge from the moment of meditation, it is as though you were shown the happy end of a play in which you are the principal actor. Having witnessed the end in your meditation, regardless of any anticlimactic state you encounter, you remain calm and secure in the knowledge that the end has been perfectly defined. The Law of Assumption excerpts. Men believe in the reality of the external world because they do not know how to focus and condense their powers to penetrate its thin crust. Strangely enough, it is not difficult to penetrate this view of the senses. To remove the veil of the senses, we do not employ great effort. The objective world vanishes as we turn our attention from it. We have only to concentrate on the state desired to mentally see it. But to give reality to it so that it will become an objective fact, we must focus our attention upon the desired state until it has all the sensory vividness and feeling of reality. When, through concentrated attention, our desire appears to possess the distinctness and feeling of reality, when the form of thought is as vivid as the form of nature, we have given it the right to become a visible fact in our lives. Each man must find the means best suited to his nature to control his attention and concentrate on the desired state. I find for myself the best state to be one of meditation, a relaxed state akin to sleep, but a state in which I am still consciously in control of my imagination and capable of fixing my attention on a mental object. If it is difficult to control the direction of your attention while in the state akin to sleep, you may find gazing fixedly into an object very helpful. Do not look at its surface, but rather into and beyond any plain object, such as a wall, a carpet, or any object which possesses depth. Arrange it to return as little reflection as possible. Imagine, then, that in this depth you are seeing and hearing what you want to see and hear until your attention is exclusively occupied by the imagined state. At the end of your meditation, when you awake from your controlled waking dream, you feel as though you had returned from a great distance. The visible world, which you had shut out, returns to consciousness, and by its very presence, informs you that you have been self-deceived into believing that the object of your contemplation was real. But if you remain faithful to your vision, this sustained mental attitude will give reality to your visions, and they will become visible, concrete facts in your world. Define your highest ideal, and concentrate your attention upon this ideal until you identify yourself with it. Assume the feeling of being it, the feeling that would be yours were you now embodying it in your world. This assumption, though now denied by your senses, if persisted in, will become a fact in your world. You will know when you have succeeded in fixing the desired state in consciousness simply by looking mentally at the people you know. This is a wonderful check on yourself, as your mental conversations are more revealing than your physical conversations are. If, in your mental conversations with others, you talk with them as you formerly did, then you have not changed your concept of self, for all changes of concepts of self result in a changed relationship to the world. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. The key to progress in life and to the fulfillment of dreams lies in the ready obedience to the voice. Unhesitating obedience to its voice is an immediate assumption of the wish fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. Man, by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then living and acting on this conviction, changes his future in harmony with his assumption. To change his future is the inalienable right of freedom-loving individuals. There would be no progress in the world were it not for the divine discontent in man, which urges him to higher and higher levels of consciousness. Again today, speaking of changing your future, I wish to stress the importance of a real transformation of self, not merely a slight alteration of circumstances which, in a matter of moments, will permit us to slip back into the old dissatisfied man. In your meditation, allow others to see you as they would see you were this new concept of self a concrete fact. You always seem to others the embodiment of the ideal you inspire. Therefore, in meditation, when you contemplate others, you must be seen by them mentally as you would be seen by them physically were your conception of yourself an objective fact. That is, in meditation, you imagine that they see you expressing this nobler man you desire to be. If you assume that you are what you want to be, your desire is fulfilled, and in fulfillment, all longing to be is neutralized. This also is an excellent check on yourself as to whether or not you have actually succeeded in changing self. You cannot continue desiring what has been realized. Rather, you are in a mood to give thanks for a gift received. Your desire is not something you labor to fulfill. It is recognizing something you already possess. It is assuming the feeling of being that which you desire to be. It is through desire that you rise above your present sphere, and the road from longing to fulfillment is shortened as you experience in imagination all that you would experience in the flesh, were you or your friend the embodiment of the desire you have for yourself or him. Experience has taught me that this is the perfect way to achieve my great goals for others as well as for myself. However, my own failures would convict me were I to imply that I have completely mastered the control of my attention. I can, however, with the ancient teachers say, "This one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press towards the mark for the prize." Truth excerpts. The original birthplace of imagination is in love. Love is its lifeblood. God is love. Love never faileth. Infinite creative spirit is love. The urge that caused infinite unconditioned consciousness to condition itself into millions of sensitive forms is love. Our concept of ourself determines the scenery of our lives. We are ever our own jailers. The prison doors that we thought closed are truly ajar, waiting for us to see the truth. Man ever surrounds himself with the true image of himself, says Emerson. Every spirit builds itself a house, and beyond its house a world, and beyond its world a heaven. Know then the world exists for you. For you, the phenomenon is perfect. What we are, that only we can see. Feeling is the secret. Excerpts. The world that moves us is the one we imagine, not the world that surrounds us. In the imagination lie the unexplored continents and man's great future adventure. Recognizing the power of feeling, let us pay strict attention to our moods and attitudes. Every stage of man's progress is made through the exercise of his imagination and feeling. By creating an ideal within our mental sphere, we can feel ourselves into this ideal image till we become one and the same with it, absorbing its qualities into the very core of our being. The solitary or captive can, by the intensity of his imagination and feeling, affect myriads so that he can act through many men and speak through many voices. Extend your feelers, trust your touch, participate in all flights of your imaginations, and be not afraid of your own sensitivities. The best way to feel another's good is to be more intensely aware of it. Be like my friend and have more of a feeling for the health, the wealth, the happiness you desire. Ideas do not bless unless they descend from heaven and take flesh. Make results or accomplishments the crucial test of true imagination. As you observe these results, you will determine to fill your images with love and to walk in a high and noble mood. Affirm the reality of your own greatness. Excerpts. In the creation of a new way of life, we must begin at the beginning with our own individual regeneration. The formulation of organizations, political bodies, religious bodies, social bodies is not enough. The trouble we see goes deeper than we perceive. The essential revolution must happen within ourselves. Everything depends on our attitude towards ourself. That which we will not affirm within ourself can never develop in our world. This is the religion by which we live, for religion begins in subjective experience. Like charity, it begins at home. Man is constantly looking about his world and asking, what's to be done? What will happen? When he should ask himself, who am I? What is my concept of myself? If we wish to see the world a finer, greater place, we must affirm the reality of a finer, greater being within ourselves. It is the ultimate purpose of my teaching to point the road to this consummation. I am trying to show you how the inner man must readjust himself, what must be the new premise of his life, in order that he may lose his soul on the level he now knows and find it again on the high level he seeks. Creativeness is basically a deeper receptiveness, a keener susceptibility. The future dream must become a present fact in the mind of anyone who would alter his life. Every great outpicturing is preceded by a period of profound absorption. When that absorption is filled with our highest ideal, when we become that ideal, then we see it manifest in our world, and we realize that the present does not recede into the past, but advances into the future. This is essentially how we change our future. A now, which is elsewhere, has for us no absolute meaning. We only recognize now, when it is at the same time here. When we feel ourselves into the desired state here and now, we have truly changed our future. This is a challenge to us all. What concept are we holding of ourselves and the higher regions of our soul? Neville Goddard, June 30th, 1968. Lecture 255, Sami's Question. Neville, good evening. We won't be meeting for several weeks, so tonight I'd like to follow a different format. I'd like to take a question from the audience and use that as the inspiration for my lecture. Does anybody have a question they would like me to answer? I see a hand over there, but I can't see who you are. The stage light is in my eyes. Oh yes, I can see now. It is Sami, one of our regulars. Glad to see you as always. What question can I answer for you? Sami, I have been living by your teachings and have had many wonderful things that I imagined come to pass. I imagined financial prosperity, and it doesn't seem to have come to pass. At least not as I imagined it. What should I do? Neville. This question is not just Sami's question. It is a question we all must answer, as every day all of us are called upon to witness to the truth of God. And when something doesn't seem to happen as we expected and imagined it to be, then we have to find out what has happened and do the right thing to get a better result. The word Satan means doubt. Desiring a certain state, reason may tell you it will be difficult to attain. If you listen to your reason and doubt your desires, Satan has made himself known to you, and this happens to all of us. You may think you understand what I have said, but if you aren't getting what you want, there is something you haven't understood. So I'm going to start by saying something I've said before. When I speak of feeling, I don't mean emotion, but acceptance of the fact that the desire is fulfilled. And you can think you did that, but you can know for sure, if you haven't achieved your goal, you don't have acceptance. And the reason you don't have acceptance is that you are still thinking of the goal rather than thinking from the goal. That is all there is to it. And if you are thinking of the goal rather than from the goal, you can do that for 10 years and nothing will happen. But the instant you think from the goal, your world will change. And that can happen tomorrow. It can happen in an instant. But it can never happen from continuing to think in that old way. Tonight I will ask all of you to take my yoke upon you and learn of me, to listen to me as I explain the understanding of Scripture. This teaching is not hard. It is simply this. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you? Your Heavenly Father sleeps within you as your wonderful human imagination. You must learn to live in your imagination morning, noon, and night, and when you do, you will have your goal. Start with the law, learn how it works, and prove it in daily action. For right now, God sleeps in you, but when you awake from your sleep, He will awaken in you as the promise, and you will find yourself entering into the promised land of your dreams. If you remain faithful to God, no power on earth can stop that from coming to pass. Because remember, all cause is spiritual. What does this mean? It means that if your world is not the way you want it, there is some imaginal act in your mind that is keeping the unwanted experience alive. Your only problem is that, unable to remember the moment a state was imagined. When it takes form and is seen by the outer eye, its harvest is not recognized and therefore denied. So you do not realize the imagination that is keeping your unwanted state alive, but it is there, and when you separate yourself from that imagining, your unwanted state will vanish. This is the great adventure, for when you do this, you truly discover and know, in a way you never knew before, that God is your Father, and there is an endless joy in accepting that Jesus Christ is in you, endless expressing as your own wonderful human imagination. Let me share a letter with you. This is from a man named John, telling me of his financial good fortune. And let me begin by saying this is not the first letter I got from John. Last year, having heard some of my lectures, he decided he wanted to increase his financial wealth. And his problem was the same as many of you here. He thought he was imagining from the goal, but nothing happened, and he asked me what he should do. And I told him that he had to find a time in his life when he had truly gotten that feeling of living from the goal and seen something happen as a result, and then he should study his thoughts and feelings and realize what he did that was different. And when he figured that out and did that with his financial goal, he would be free. And when he realized what he had done to keep his goal from happening, how every day he had been imagining in the wrong way and keeping his goal away from him instead of coming to him, he would laugh because now he would be free. And what do you think I did after I read this letter? I used the pruning shears of revision. I imagined him writing to me and telling me of his great good fortune, how wealth had entered his life through a change in how he used his imagination. And today I have that very letter in my hand. And I knew that would happen, and in a totally natural way. And it will happen for you too, because the truth is, you can do anything in this world that you want to do, but you must remember that the Holy Spirit is in you. You may not believe it today, but it really is the truth. The truth is that you have to find Christ, the Christ in you, which is your own wonderful human imagination. For this world is made up of infinite states, which you may clothe yourself with. If you do not like the state you are in, you can get out of it. And I suggest that you do that, and I suggest that you do that today. For why would you want to stay for 1 minute longer in a state you do not like? For you have the power to have any state, to be in any state, and to live in the state of your dreams. Nothing appears by accident. Everything is the result of an idea. The problem you are experiencing today is because of an idea which you planted yesterday. You were asleep, and while you were asleep, you planted an idea that is now the unlovely state which you inhabit today. And how did you do this? You did it by feeling intense. And while you were feeling intense, an unlovely seed was planted, which has become an unlovely state. How do I know this? Because you always reap the thoughts you sow. And when you cannot remember sowing the seed, this teaching can seem hard to understand. And when you figure it out, when you first practice this technique and get it right, you will be surprised when it happens. But you will learn that when you completely accept the state assumed, you will not have to figure out how to make it happen. In fact, you do not have to do a thing to make it come to pass. The assumption contains its own plan of fulfillment. The seed of the oak tree contains the tree. Your job is to plant the seed, but it is not your job to grow the tree. The seed grows by itself, and God makes the seed turn into the tree, not you. So tonight I say to you, use the law and prove its power by becoming the man you imagine yourself to be. And when you do this, as you get the law to work for you, don't forget the promise. For without the promise, what would it matter if you owned the entire earth? Believe me when I say that you're only suffering from amnesia. Jesus Christ is in you, and when you realize that Jesus Christ is in you, then you know that you can put yourself in any state, be it wealth or poverty. So I say to you, if you don't enjoy poverty, don't get into the state. And if you are in poverty and you don't want to be in poverty anymore, get out of it. For you are not weak. Infinite power resides in your imagination. You could be in prison and imagine yourself free, and when you made this freedom real as an imaginal act, you would be free, and it would all come about in a wonderful way. Start today to follow all of your imaginings through from start to finish. For you use the law of imagination all day long. It is not big things only, it is everything. Find out how you get imagination to work for you in little things, and then do the big things in the very same way. And when you awaken from your dream, you realize that you are not limited, you are not weak, you are not small, you are not poor. You are the Lord Jesus Christ. When you find on that day that you find yourself where you imagined you were, you will have recognized the infinite power you are and set yourself free. And when you are free indeed. For it is not you who frees you, it is God who sets you free. And when God sets you free, you are free indeed. For you are now worshiping the true God, your human imagination. Try it now. Believe in the reality of your imaginal act, for it is God, your imagination in action. Dare to believe in the reality of God, your imagination in action. It happened to me, it can happen to you. When you learn how to focus on your assumption until it becomes totally real to you, you will watch with amazement as everyone in your world plays their parts in the fulfillment of your dream. And realize that this is not just the law being fulfilled in you, but the promise as well. For there is a plan of redemption buried in you, which will erupt in the fullness of time. When redemption becomes alive in you, you will experience all that is said of a man called Jesus in Scripture. And when this happens, you find that, with no effort at all, you enter the state you desire to express. With no effort at all, you find that you can believe it is true, and that when you do this, no earthly power can stop your dream from objectifying itself. I urge you to test your creative power on this level. Do it now. Take every moment you can and clothe yourself in the feeling that your wish is fulfilled. Live in this imagination all day long. Feel its reality, and do not forget that moment that you did this for the first time, for that moment is the moment you saw the world from your goal. That moment is the time of the planting of your dream, and as every dream has its own seed time and harvest, the day you plant your dream, you know that in its own good time, that moment of seed time will appear in this world, properly clothed as a wonderful harvest and experienced as an objective fact. Don't consider the means. Jesus Christ in you knows much better than you how to make your dreams come to pass. Your job is to know your desire is already an accomplished fact, and that's all you need to know. Get the feeling of reveling in your dream, because it is true now. How do you do this? Let me ask you, what would you do if your dream was true? Answer the question and you will know. Would you have a party? Who would you invite? What would you do at the party? What music would you play? What friends of yours would be there? This is what I mean by getting the reality of it. Do not think that you have to climb the mountain and that climbing the mountain is hard. For if you still think you have to climb the mountain, then you are still thinking of the goal. You have to look down at life from the top of the mountain and notice the path that you took to get to the top and be happy that you don't have to climb anymore because you are there. Let me tell you a story that will convince you of how to do this. Pretend with me that you live in New York and that you want to take an ocean voyage. So you are in your apartment in New York, thinking of taking your voyage. And when you do this, you are still thinking of your goal. And you will never achieve it until you change how you think. But that is where you start, for that is where everyone starts. You are now seated in your apartment in New York City, contemplating the joy that would be yours if you were on an ocean liner sailing across the great Atlantic. But now you make a change. Your eyes are closed. You have consciously released the New York apartment, and in its place you sense and feel that you are on an ocean liner. You are seated in a deck chair. There is nothing around you but the vast Atlantic. Fix the reality of this ship and ocean so that in this state, you can mentally recall the day when you are seated in your New York apartment dreaming of this day at sea. As you sit on the deck of the ship, feeling the sea breeze cross your face, feeling the movement of the ship gently rolling in the waves, recall the mental picture of yourself seated there in New York dreaming of this day. In your imagination, see the memory picture of yourself back there in your New York apartment. If you succeed in looking back on your New York apartment without consciously returning there, then you have successfully prepared the reality of this voyage. The key is that you must not return to the apartment. For if it is true that if you sailed on this ship, then you must be on it, for where else could you be? Remain in this conscious state, feeling the reality of the ship and the ocean. Feel the joy of this accomplishment, then open your eyes. You will be back in your apartment physically, but something will have changed. When you do this, you feel differently because you have changed your imagination. And now, because you are thinking from your goal and not of the goal, this voyage will come to you in a wonderful way. Even if someone halfway across the world has to take an action for you to be on this ship, it is already in motion the moment you find yourself on the deck of the ship in your imagination and do not return to an apartment but remain in the mental state of your goal. Notice that when you are thinking of the goal, you feel weak. But when you are thinking from the goal, you feel strong. You feel joyous. You feel the presence of the Holy Spirit in your life. Truly, as it is said in Scripture, God has gone ahead and prepared the place for you. For where you are in consciousness, there you shall be in the body also. So that you understand what I am saying, I will say it one more time. You must change your imagining, and you must change it now if you want your goal to come to you now. That is why I say, if you want to live in a new house, fall asleep in that new house. For that is what you would do if you had it. You would sleep in the new house and not in the old house. And in the new house, you would think of the old house and realize that you don't live there anymore because you don't. You have sold it. And you don't live there anymore because you live in the new house. This is easy. Don't make it hard. Simply determine what you want and imagine a scene, which would imply you have realized it. Enter into the spirit of the scene. Participate in it by giving it sensory vividness. Then relax as you feel its reality. And in that scene, realize that you are not in the old reality anymore because you are in the new one. Do you see what I mean? So you must learn to live in your imagination morning, noon, and night. And when you do, you must also learn to think from the goal. And when you learn to think from the goal, the gates of heaven will open for you. For all that you wish will come to pass in a wonderful way. Just name your goal. Imagine you have reached it and persuade yourself it is true. That's all. That is the beginning and the end. If it takes 1,000 people to play their part to aid the birth of your imaginal act, they will do so, not even knowing they are playing the part you assign them. The Father has been sleeping within you. Today, let him awake. Let today be the day that you allow him to break the chain, for on that day you will rise as he. Move into the state of your desire. Be in the desired state in your imagination, and before your eyes, people will respond because of your action. Dare to assume you are wealthy, and watch everyone play their parts to provide you with the wealth you claim to have. They will, for they are only yourself pushed out. Remember, everything is yours for the taking. If you want it, take it. It is all yours. If you persist in acknowledging what your inner senses are telling you until you are persuaded of their reality, you will see their evidence. Then you will know from experience who Christ really is. I invite you all, when you leave here tonight, to go all out and imagine you really are the man or woman you want to be. And do not doubt, for the minute doubt steps in, a mental division descends, as doubt is the devil. Instead, you become that man, that woman which you desire to be. And when you do not be like Lot's wife. Never look back. Enter into the new world and be grateful. And when you enter your dream and never look back, your world will rearrange itself around your dream. Your dream world will have become your real world. Your old world will have melted in the image of your dream. And the most amazing thing is that this will happen without any difficulty or help on your part. I was born in a little island called Barbados. I do not feel it will be long before I will vanish, leaving not a trace behind. This cannot happen, however, until I have finished the work I was given to do. Only then can I ask my Father to return me to the glory that was mine, the glory I possessed before the world was. And this glory will be yours as well, for we are all sons of the Father. And so my journey is your journey. Your feet will walk the same steps as mine. Just as I am free, so you are free too. And yes, when the world hears of this, the ministers will turn my experiences into their institutional concept and once again void the word of God. But this doesn't change the truth. For the truth is that I am God, and so are you. Does that answer your question, Sami? Sami? Yes. Neville? Sami, would you come up here on stage for a moment? I want everybody here to meet Sami, who is one of our most devoted members. I wanted you up here, Sami, because I wanted to say to all of you, right now, I know that Sami is going to be a tremendous success. I know this because I've seen it in my imagination. And what I've seen in my imagination must come to pass, because God is my own wonderful human imagination. And tonight, I know when we enter into the silence, that Sami will also see his success in his own wonderful human imagination. For I've not only seen the law in action for Sami, but the promise as well. He has a wonderful future ahead of him, full of success and prosperity. And this is true because tonight, in the silence, Sami will see the world from his goal. And so, in the most wonderful way, his dream will unfold in the days and weeks to come. And so it will for each of you. For when you do what he has done, to study these ideas with earnest devotion and live life as it should be lived from your imagination, your success is certain. And now, let us go into the silence. Neville Goddard, on treading in the winepress. I have bought clothes, brought them home, and wondered what possessed me to buy them. I did it because someone was treading in the winepress elsewhere. Someone imagined a suit of clothes, so I went to my tailor, chose a cloth, and paid for the suit. But when I brought it home, my wife wouldn't let me bring it into the house. But then a friend who wanted something just like it contacted me and got the suit. He was treading in the winepress while I paid for the suit. From Neville's Walk by Faith lecture. But I say to you, your imagination manifests itself in the imaginations of men. The world is playing its part because you are imagining every moment in time. Who knows who is treading in the winepress tonight, causing the subtle changes in the minds of men? Perhaps he feels wrongfully accused and is now sitting in jail thinking of getting even with society. That's treading in the winepress. When he can lift his thoughts to the point of vision, the act is committed, and it will manifest itself in the world of man. From the Secret of Causation lecture. William Butler Yeats said, I will never be certain that it was not some woman treading in the winepress who started that subtle change in men's mind, or the passion from which so many countries have been put to the sword, did not begin in the mind of some poor shepherd boy, lighting up his eyes for a moment before he ran upon his way. Who knows who is treading in the winepress this night? Who knows what a person in solitary confinement is imagining? Is he using this only power in the universe infernally or blissfully? I hope you use your imagination in the state of bliss, for the outside world is alive because of this hidden power within you. I know that a man imagining intensely can influence millions. He can act through many men and speak with many voices. This little group of men, imagining their promotions, are influencing millions and moving through unnumbered men toward their goal. Those who cover their costumes with medals, like the Stalins and the Hitlers of the world, are displaying their complete misunderstanding of God's power of imagination. From the Hidden Cause lecture.